What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 2016 Porsche 970 Panamera GTS. Today on the Panamera behind me, we're going to be covering how to replace your rear brakes. In front of me we have a Zimmerman and TechStar kit, which is available on fcpro.com. That kit includes 2 zinc-coated rotors, a set of TechStar OE pads. We have some new brake pad shims, as well as some wear pad sensors, some set screws, and some anti-rattle clips. Added to the kit from the website are new bolts for the calipers. Now, typically, Porsche recommends you replace these every time you do the brakes. While they're not torque to yield bolts, I'm sure they have a very good reason for that. Now, these are going to last you anywhere from 20 to 60,000 miles. It really depends on the kind of driving you do on your vehicle. This is a heavy car, so the pads are already thin to begin with. You have large calipers, large rotors. They are going to see some abuse whether you're driving like a normal person, spirited driver. So 20 to 60K is kind of what we're seeing on these. A couple things you can do to inspect your brakes is there's feeler gauges out there that you can measure the thickness of the pads with. Anything less than 2 millimeters, you want to replace them. The rotors will start to wear and develop a lip on the inboard and outboard side of the disc itself. You can run your fingernail across the face of them. If you catch a lip on either end, more than likely it's time to replace the rotors. We always recommend you do them in a pair, and with the lifetime replacement guarantee, it makes it a little bit easier the next time around. But before we get too much into this, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this DIY, we'll be using a 1/2-inch drive torque wrench and ratchet. We have a large hammer. I have a small detail brush, which I'll use to clean up the calipers. Not mandatory, but a nice to have. The old hardware for the set screws on this Panamera are Phillips head screws, so we have a Phillips head screwdriver. We have a small flathead screwdriver, which we'll use as a pry tool. We have a small 1/4-inch ratchet with a small extension and a T27 for our new set screw hardware. Important to have for this job are some caliper hanger hooks. We have a caliper spreader tool, which is also available on fcpro.com. This one's great for dual-sided calipers that have pistons on dual sides. We'll link that in the description below. 19mm socket for the lug bolts, 10mm hex for the caliper carrier bolts, and then we have some electric impact tools which make removal of the wheel nice and easy, as well as a drill with a wire wheel attachment. If you don't have that, you can use a wire brush or some emery cloth to clean up the hubs. And then for chemicals, we have some PB blaster, we have some liquid moly ceramic paste, and some brake clean. Now we know what tools we're going to be needing for this job. Let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. All right, my good people, before we get started on the brake job, it is important to know, and this applies to any vehicle you're going to be working on, where your brake master cylinder reservoir is located and what the fluid level looks like. If before you start your job, the fluid level already looks a little too high, you're going to want to consider removing some fluid from the reservoir so that when you compress the pistons back into your calipers, it doesn't overflow and overpressurize up here and possibly cause a leak. It never hurts either to remove the cap and just inspect the condition of the fluid. If it looks a little dark, then more than likely it's time to change it. A good interval just for safe insurance is at least every 2 years. That way your fluid stays nice and fresh, no moisture builds up in there and starts corroding your system. Our fluid level looks okay, so we'll just keep an eye on it as we go through this brake job, but now we know where that's located. Let's go ahead and get the car up in the air and start on this brake DIY. All right, to put the Panamera in jack mode so you don't damage any of the air suspension components, you're going to turn your ignition on. You're going to press and hold down the suspension button for at least 10 seconds. And on our display screen, we will see something that says the system is off. And that way we can safely lift the vehicle without hurting anything on the car. So hold the button down. Keep an eye on the screen. Level control off. And now we can safely jack up the vehicle. All right, my good people, today we're going to work on the rear passenger side of the Panamera. However, the steps are going to be identical for both sides. Both sides have wear sensors, so pretty straightforward. To get started, we're going to start by removing our 5 19mm lug bolts. If your car has a wheel lock, make sure you have that lock handy before you get started. Once you have that ready to go, we can zap these off. If you're working on the ground, not on the lift, you want to break the lug bolts free with your breaker bar before you jack up the vehicle. Once the car's up in the air, it'll be easier to just undo the bolts by hand. But if you have an impact gun like we do today, just go ahead and zap them out. Just be mindful the wheel will fall once the lug bolts are removed. unless corrosion is holding it in place. Now we have our wheel removed, we have a better view of where we're going to be working. We have our brake disc, we have our caliper. This would be a great time to kind of clean your caliper up before you disassemble, or you can do it after if you like, but I like to clean everything up first. That way when we assemble everything, we have nice new parts. But before we take anything apart, we can take an actual look at the status or condition of the pads and rotor here. If you look at the brake disc, you can use your fingernail. Obviously I have gloves on right now, but there is a lip that has formed on the inside portion of the disc, and there's one that's starting on the outside. So normally that screwdriver should just glide right over. In our case, it's catching, so these are pretty worn. And then looking at the brake pads themselves, I don't have a feeler gauge on me now. They have an okay amount of life left on them, but the rotors are definitely shot. So we're gonna go ahead and replace everything. Now would also be a good time to hit your set screws with some penetrating fluid so you can get those out easier. As you can see on these, they are Phillips head. As I mentioned, sometimes you need two sets of tools. The old hardware is Phillips. The new hardware going in is a T27. So just keep that in mind. So for now, we'll hit some penetrating fluid on those. I'll clean this up, and then we'll pick it back up with getting these parts off. All right, my good people, one note real quick before we proceed, something that I'm discovering just now as we're taking everything apart here and cleaning things up. The kit that we have on the website currently lists a brake pad wear sensor with a single tassel on it, a single sensor, if you will, on the end of it. There is two different ones for the Panameras. Some vehicles come equipped with a single, some vehicles come equipped with the dual head sensor. Now, on our car specifically, it's going to use the dual head sensor, so just keep that in mind before you tear everything apart or order your parts online. Don't do what I do. Take the wheel off or look through the wheel and just see what kind of brake pad wear sensor you have on there so you don't get in a jam, because you can't just walk into the warehouse like we can if you have the wrong sensor. So we're going to make a note of it on the catalog. By the time you see this, that note will probably be there already. But I just wanted to point that out. Two different style wear sensors for the rear. Keep that in mind. See which one your vehicle has first and then go from there. In our case, we have our brake caliper cleaned up. I've hit the set screws with some penetrating fluid. I'm going to go ahead and just break them free now before we take anything else apart. I'm going to take my Phillips head screwdriver and my percussive instrument. I like giving them a couple whacks just to break any corrosion free, give them a better chance at coming undone. Now with that, we should be able to break both of these Phillips head screws loose. There's one, we'll leave it on for now. There's two. All right, we'll leave those on for now. Once we have the brake caliper off, then we can work on removing the rotor. But for now, our next step is going to be to disconnect the brake pad wear sensor itself. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, to undo the brake pad wear sensor from the vehicle, you're just going to press on the small tab that's facing the inside of the car. It helps to kind of push the sensor in like you're going to connect it. Press the tab and then pull back. Follow the sensor wire back towards the caliper, and you can simply yank out the old sensors from the brake caliper themselves. Here's a look at those and how they sit in the pads. Once we have the pads off or we have our new pads ready, we'll show you just exactly how to key these in for install. But the main gist is the meatier side of the sensor faces the pads. The thinner side with the brass clip faces the outside of the pads or the outside of the caliper. So they only go in one way. All right, to remove the caliper, we have two 10mm hex bolts that hold it into place. You want to also have your caliper hanger tool or bungee or zip tie, whatever you're going to use, handy so you can hang that off to the side. You can either use a control arm or you can use the hard line coming off of the car. This caliper is pretty light, so you're not going to really damage anything using the hard lines to hang it. But if you want to avoid that, you can always use the control arm and bungee cord it to that or zip tie it to that. We'll grab our 10mm hex on our ratchet and we'll break both of these bolts free. Now we can just go ahead and remove the bolts the rest of the way. Again, Porsche recommends you replace these, so if you can, I highly recommend you do so. If not, make sure you clean them up as best as possible. I would even suggest a small amount of some light strength, maybe medium strength thread locker when you go to reassemble everything. Now we have both of those removed, we can work our caliper off of our rotor. I'm going to twist and release the wear sensor bracket, or the connector from the bracket. It just twists and turns, and we'll hang our caliper off to the side. Next, we're going to proceed by removing the rotor. So we have 2 set screws to remove. If you remember, we already loosened them up a little bit. If you've taken yours out fully and your rotor is seized to your hub, you can always just thread a lug bolt back in. You can grab your favorite hammer and give it a couple whacks to free it up. I have both set screws and the lug bolt in there just as insurance. These are big, heavy rotors. No reason to mess around and have them fall on you. All right. With that, I'll pull the set screws off now in full. Now that the set screws are off, we'll pull the lug bolts out, and then we'll pull our brake disc off. Obviously, not mentioned already, it should be self-explanatory, but you should never have your parking brake on whenever you're doing rear brakes. Otherwise, you'll never be able to get the rotor off of your brake assembly. These cars use a drum-style parking brake, which ride on the inside of your rotor. So if they're expanded and in use, the brake disc will never come off. Now you have your rotor off. This is a great time to inspect your parking brake shoes. If they're in good shape, you just clean everything up with some brake clean and then get ready to reassemble. Sometimes you need to adjust the parking brake shoes if the new rotor will not fit over. There's a small adjustment key here, which we'll show you up close in just a moment, and we'll show you how to either open it or close it. Just note with these cars, you do have to calibrate the parking brake system. So if you change it too much, you may get a fault. For that, you will need something like an autel or a scanner that will communicate with the Porsche so you can let it go through the calibration process. But usually you should be able to just get your new rotor on and move on with your life. So let's go ahead and just kind of clean this up a little bit. We will wire wheel the hub, and then we'll show you a close-up of that adjustment key should you need to adjust your parking brake shoes. All right, if you want, come on in a little bit closer. I'll show you the adjustment knob on the parking brake shoes here. And what's great about these cars is if you're in the mode or you're in the need to adjust them, all you have to do is really just remove one lug bolt, obviously the car up in the air. You don't even have to take off the wheel, and you simply adjust through the lug bolts with a flathead screwdriver or a tool designed specifically for that. I usually use a skinny flathead screwdriver, feed it through and adjust, which we'll show you now. So the adjustment is right here. Obviously, let's pretend the wheel's on. The screwdriver would be going through the lug bolt. On the rear passenger side, if you turn the key up, it is going to expand this whole piece, meaning the brake pad shoes are going to go out further, making it tighter against the inside drum of the disc. If you crank it down and flick the key down, it's going to close this, meaning the shoes are going to come in more, giving you more gap between the pads and the drum. So just a note on how to adjust them, otherwise not necessary for this job. Now we're going to work on compressing our pistons into the caliper. You can see I have the shop towel draped over the kind of control arms and knuckle assembly. That way I'm going to be moving this around a bit. I don't want to mar up the paint on the caliper against the metal on the car. You can use a towel or something similar to do the same effect. We're going to take our caliper spreader tool, using the old pads as backing plates, and we're going to insert it and just press and compress the pistons in until they stop. They should go in very easily. If you have any trouble doing this, then you might have a problem with your brake caliper or perhaps a collapsed brake line of some sort. So those are in all the way. They look pretty good. If you don't have that tool, honestly, sometimes you can just grab and press these in by hand and they'll go in. They're that light or simple, if you will. Now we're going to take our favorite flathead tool and just gently pry the pads out. If you don't have a flathead or you don't want to use a flathead, you can just use your fingers, and on the ends of the pads, just kind of pry them down off of the backing plates in here. Here's our old pads. And these are usually stuck to the back of those shims. There's a little bit of glue on them, so you might need to pry the shim separate of the pad if possible. As you can see in this case, the shim came out with the brake pad, which is totally fine. We're going to be replacing these anyways, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. And if your shim stayed in place like the one did on the inboard side of the caliper, you can simply work it gently down by hand. These should have been lubed up before install, which we're going to do when we install our new ones here. And then last but not least, not mandatory, but you have your anti-rattle spring clip. If you want to replace it, it's pretty straightforward. You pop it out and then you press the new one in. We'll go ahead and replace it now just to show you what that looks like. But these don't typically go bad unless they are maybe corroded or something like that. I'm going to grab our flathead screwdriver, just kind of feed it through the one side of the clip and pry away from the caliper, and out comes the clip. These are kind of a pain in the butt to install, but if you use maybe like the back of the screwdriver like we'll show you, the goal is just to kind of give them a good whack and they'll pop into place. So we'll get rid of this one. We're going to clean up the inside of that caliper a bit. Mainly the surface of the pistons. I want to make sure that's nice and free of any contaminants or any chemicals that you used to clean your brake calipers like we did today. All right, let me grab a little bit of brake clean and give them a final spritz. All right, as long as our dowels and the face of the pistons are clean, that's really all we want here. Now we can go ahead and install our new anti-rattle clip. Here's our new anti-rattle clip. I'm going to simply key it on the caliper. There's two notches on the inside cross here that these kind of sit in. Get it started on one side. Now with the clip kind of in place, I'm going to use the back of this Phillips head screwdriver and kind of help press it into the caliper so it clips in. All right. Something like that. Our brake anti-rattle clip is in place. Next, we're going to install the pad shims. We're going to lubricate the pad shims before installation. They have two O-rings on either dowel. So we're going to use the liquid moly ceramic paste, which we showed you at the beginning of the video, and just give them a very light coat. This will also help next time someone does this job to remove them. Now with the sticky backing peeled off, we're ready to install the shim. It's lubed on the back end and sticky on the other end. That just kind of helps the pad stay in place. I'm just going to push it by the hardware on the inside of it, and it just slides into place. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and get the next one ready for install. And same thing, we'll peel the sticky backing off of the shim, and then we'll feed it into the other side of the pistons. All right. Now with that, we can go ahead and install our brake pads. We're going to be pushing up against this clip as we install the brake pads. But before we do that, a little bit of paste on the dowels here that they sit on, just so that they can glide back and forth easily. You don't need a whole lot on here. The ceramic stuff is great. It's moisture proof, water won't just wash it off. And I would argue it's a little bit easier to use than some anti-seize, because you open that thing up and next thing you know, everything's covered in silver. All right, one brake pad in and pushing towards the clip, and then it goes over the dowels. If you look closely at this other pad before I install it, there is a cutout on it. There's a cutout on each pad, so it doesn't matter which way they go, as they both receive a sensor on the rear, but the cutout is designed for the brake pad wear sensor. You have a thin side on the backing side. That's where the skinny side with the brass clip is going to go into, and then the meaty side is on the pad side. Pretty straightforward. All right, at this point our caliper is fully loaded, ready to rock and roll. We'll leave that hanging there for a moment, and now we can go ahead and work on installing our new brake disc. So we're going to use a little bit of anti-seize compound on that hub. We'll get our new set screws, and just keep in mind these rotors are zinc coated, so the last thing you want to do is get your greasy mitts all over them and hit them with brake clean. You're going to deteriorate the coating, so change your glove, wash your hands, whatever you need to do so you can handle your new rotors with nice clean hands, and then we'll get ready to install the brake disc. So let's do that next. All right, now we can go ahead and install our brake disc. I'm going to use a little bit of liquid moly ceramic paste. Well, Zimmerman doesn't call for it. This is a New England car. It's going to see the winter. So more than likely, at some point, the zinc coating will erode over time, and these will want to mate together. So a little bit of ceramic paste is definitely not going to hurt, but not necessarily mandatory per Zimmerman. You be the judge. I'll let you do you, my good people. We have some freshy gloves on. Go ahead and slide our brake disc over, lining up the set screw holes as best as possible from the get-go. All right. Now we'll take our new torque screws and get those started. Again, I'm using a T27 for these. If you're reusing your Phillips head set screws, just clean them up nicely, and you can put a little bit of thread locker on the threads just to keep them from coming out, as these new factory ones have a little bit of thread locker on them already. And then we're going to go ahead and just snug them down by hand. But if you want to torque them, 10 Newton meters is going to be your friend for these set screws. So we'll grab our caliper, we'll unhook it. Don't forget to grab your hanger tool. Left many of those in the wheel wells before. And then we'll slide that over. Grab our new 10mm hex bolts and get those started by hand. All right, now that they're both snug up, 85 Newton meters. There's two. Beautiful. Now that that is nice and secure, we can go ahead and install our new brake pad wear sensor. We'll give you a nice close-up of what the notches on the pads look like once they're in the caliper, and then we can go ahead and install that. We're going to start by installing the outboard side of the sensor first, using a small flathead to kind of push it in the rest of the way. All right, that looks good. I'm going to feed it through the clip here in the middle, just like that. Then we can install the inboard sensor. Excuse my big head in the way. There we go. Then we can grab the harness side of the car, the connector. And remember, we removed it earlier. You simply just feed it back into the bracket and then twist it to lock it so that the locking tab is on the outside facing the vehicle, or this airbag on the vehicle, so that our locking tab can key into that. And just like that, my good people. All right, now that everything is nice and secured, we can go ahead and reinstall our wheel. Then we can start our lug bolts by hand. And then now that all lug bolts are started, we're just going to snug them all down evenly in a star pattern, just so that the wheel seats flush to the hub. And then we can lower the car down and give them the final torque. Now with the car on the ground, we're going to torque our lug bolts to 180 Newton meters. We have our torque wrench set. We're going to tighten them in a star pattern. All right. And with that, my good people, that is going to conclude this DIY for today. Overall, a straightforward job on the Panamera. These are nice, even though they have an electronic parking brake. It's not something you have to mess with. Just make sure it's off before you start the job. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave them in the comments section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.